Good day to you. Look at almost any town in the United States and you will find a lot of churches. Even in this town, East Stroudsburg, where I'm living, just a few doors away is a Presbyterian church. Up around the corner at the top of the road is a Catholic high school. Across town, you will also find a mosque, a synagogue, other Catholic churches, and a Methodist church, all within a mile or so of each other. And that's very typical all across the United States. Some places like the South, in South Carolina, you can find multiple churches in one neighborhood. So we are a religious nation. We are a religious nation, and consider the fact that probably it will be impossible for a person, I should say, ever to be elected president in the United States if they don't on the campaign trail say, "God bless America." It's just impossible. And that is very different, by the way, from an approach in France. In France, even though France is strongly Catholic, religion is seen as a private affair. And so presidential candidates actually are not permitted, I don't mean it's a law, but they're not permitted to say "God bless" on the. It's just something that French people don't want to hear because it's a private matter. It's a cultural value that we have. So we are in fact talking about religion today. We're talking about religion and identity. And we approach religion by reminding ourselves, as Fred Yant did in the very first chapter, that religion is perhaps the oldest form of identity that human beings have. That's the way that we have shaped our identity in the origins of the human race in many ways. So it goes back a long way, religion. Also, religion, though, it should be pointed out as a contradiction, is responsible for many of the conflicts that we have had historically and continue to have today. I mean, armed conflicts. The Crusades are often cited as one of the most violent time periods in human history, but you have only to look at Palestine and Israel today and look at the religious conflict there over the holy city and who gets to have the holy city, and that is also then breaking down into territorial wars between those two sets of peoples. And then in Africa, we had a horrific genocide between the Tutsis and the Hutus, two tribes based in Rwanda, all over religion. And so religion is the source of much conflict today. So we should understand it, right? We should understand it because it provides a cultural barrier, especially to someone like myself, I've identified myself as atheist. It is a barrier that I have sometimes when I speak to people who are fundamentalist and wanting me to believe as they do. And it's probably the reverse for them too, right? They probably have a barrier to me speaking to them because they don't understand why I don't believe. So let's take a closer look at religion across the world. Let's get a breakdown. First of all, we've got most of the world, in terms of religious believers, are Christian. 31.4% of religious believers are Christian. That's followed by Muslim people are next, 23.2%, about a quarter of the world. And then there's a drop off. The third most practiced religion is Hinduism, 15%, followed by Buddhism, 7.1%, followed by folk religions. I suppose that would be Wiggins, if you're familiar with that religion. It's kind of a witch-based religion. Then there's quite a bit of a drop-off. 2% of the world is Jewish, 8% of the world is other, and 16.4% would be unaffiliated. That's the category that I fall in. That number is much lower in the United States. Let's take on some specific religions now. We're going to start with Hinduism. Hinduism practiced mostly in India. India is not just India, just like the United States is not just the United States. It's the South, it's the North, it's the East, it's the West, it's the middle part of the country. India has many cultures as well. You've got Tamil cultures, you've got Maharashtrian cultures, Bengali cultures, Rajasthani cultures, Keralan cultures. But across those cultures, Hinduism is widely practiced. There's also Islam is practiced in India, but Hinduism is practiced mostly as the religion of choice in India. And in Hinduism, there are many paths to the truth. It's like a very decentered religion. God is one, but the God cannot be defined. The God is kind of spread all over. And the universe itself, our physical universe, has come out of Brahman, according to Hinduism. Brahman means ultimate reality. Brahman also, by the way, is one of these social classes in India. Are you aware of the caste system? India still has a caste system, and a Brahmin cannot marry someone from a lower caste. CAST is how you spell that word. Hinduism is about the pursuit of happiness and fulfillment, which come about by discovering one's own dharma. That's discovering yourself. And the ultimate goal in life is to have unity between your soul, or your true nature, also referred to as Atman, and the Brahman, to try and unite those. And the practice that Hinduism uses for this is yoga. Yoga is not just an exercise or for meditation. It is a ritual for uniting your soul with God. That's Hinduism. Now let's talk about Buddhism, which contrasts with Hinduism. In Buddhism, the main contrast is that the human being is in charge of their own destiny, whereas it's not uniting with Brahman like it is in Hinduism, but the human being is in charge of their own destiny, the master of their universe, so to speak. And the founder was an Indian prince. Again, we're staying in India for Buddhism for the most part. Prince Siddhartha Gautama. And even though he invented this Buddhism, he's not seen as a prophet like you have Jesus and Muhammad being prophets in other religions. And the goal of Buddhism is personal attainment or enlightenment, to reach that stage of nirvana. We use that word nirvana in our common speech, right? We don't really often think about where that comes from. It's a Buddhist word. It's nirvana. It's that ultimate state of enlightenment. And you can get through four noble trusts. Four noble trusts in Buddhism. You've got the inevitability of sufferings and adversity. That's a given that you will have it's inevitable that you will have suffering and adversity in life. And the reason, this is the second noble trust, that we have that we have suffering and adversity, is because we have desires, we are greedy, and those desires get unsatisfied. So number 3, as the part of the noble trust, is we can stop our suffering by not becoming attached to anything, by not owning things. That's why monks, they practice Buddhism, they just have their robes and that's it. And lastly, we can achieve enlightenment, nirvana, with the right kind of thinking. What is the right kind of thinking? It's detailed for you in the chapter, but it involves patience and charity and meditation. And by the way, there's a form of Buddhism which is also separate at the same time from Buddhism that's practiced in Japan. It's called Shinto. It's separate, but the Japanese people often are able to practice both religions as part of their cultural value system. Now let's talk about Christianity. Christianity has 21.7 billion followers across the world. Christianity began in Palestine. Originally, it was a mix of beliefs between Judaism and pagan religions of Rome. It's religions that don't recognize a god in the sky. And Greek schools of philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, etc. So this all began to change with the preachings of Jesus a carpenter, and he was baptized about the age of 30 by John the Baptist, and then Jesus had 12 disciples under the Christian religion, people who were delivered messages from him. So Christianity, as it was practiced through Jesus, was Christians were persecuted. That means, captured, killed, tortured. They were persecuted until the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity. Prior to that, Constantine and the whole Holy Roman Empire was not affiliated with Christianity, and that changed when Constantine made that choice. And he took the capital of Rome and he took the capital of Italy and he moved it out of Rome, and he put it in the Mediterranean. He put it in a place that was called Constantinople, which then split. You can see there's two huge bodies of water. Basically, you have the west on the west side of Constantinople, and then you have the east on the east side. And there was a big split there. It's called a schism in religious literature. A split, that's what a schism is. And the side on the eastern side then became known as Greek Orthodoxy or Eastern Orthodoxy religion, whereas on the west side it became Roman Catholicism. And then Roman Catholicism got further devolved when Martin Luther, a German, in 1517 broke away and formed the Lutheran religion. The main difference between the Lutheran religion and the Catholic religion is under the Roman Catholic tradition, the priest is the one who has access to God. So to get to God as a worshiper, you have to go through the priest. Lutheranism says, no, you can have a direct access between the person and the deity, between the person and the God. Now we're going to take on Islam. Islam, based on the holy book called the Quran. It's spelled Qur''A''An, also sometimes spelled with a K, Koran. About 23% of the world's population is Muslim. They are concentrated in Morocco. Muslim people are concentrated in Morocco, Algeria, Iran, Nigeria. Surprise one there, Nigeria, Egypt, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and the place where there are more Muslims than anywhere else in the world, Indonesia. Indonesia. Within the Muslim religion, there are two different types of Muslims. You have Sunni Muslims. They're about 90% of Muslims, and they believe that the Muslim leadership has been passed from the original prophet Muhammad to caliphs. Caliphs. Caliphs are religious leaders, and they are at the center of towns and the center of pockets of populations. And so the Sunnis believe that the religious leaders of today are not necessarily descended from Muhammad, and that's different from Shiites. Shiites, about 10%, they believe that the leadership of the Muslim religion should stay within the prophet of the family of Muhammad. Islam is all about preserving the family. That's what it's about. And so it takes away vices that would lead to the destruction of families. Like there's strict prohibitions in the Islam religion against alcohol, against smoking, against premarital sex. Islam, though, is a non-hierarchical religion. There's no priests, right? And there's no hierarchy of a church and bishops, etc. There's no one institution that speaks for all Muslims. Islam is more about a way of life, living life according to the book of the Quran, according to the Quran. And Muhammad himself, the prophet, he's not seen in the same way that Jesus is. Jesus is not seen as a god. Muhammad is one of many prophets. Jesus is recognized by the Islamic religion as being a prophet too. Muhammad was a businessman, and he started to receive revelations to an angel, Gabriel, the same angel that's in Christianity. He was also, by the way, a military commander, a state builder, and a political ruler. So under Islam, what you have is you have a caliph, I've already told you about that, a religious leader, and then you have a caliphate. Caliphate, some people pronounce it as well, and that's an area or a region that is ruled by a Muslim leader. And actually the Quran itself means recitation. Remember, the Quran is in Arabic, and you have to practice the Islamic religion. If you're a Muslim, you have to practice it by using Arabic. Under the Muslim religion, there is no separation between church and state. And there are 5 religious obligations of Muslims. I'll let you read about those. One of them is Ramadan. Ramadan is the ninth month in the lunar calendar, and it commemorates Muhammad receiving revelations. And during Ramadan, there's a period of fasting, giving up food, and giving up pleasures. Muslims are expected, I'm not sure if it's still the case in a post-pandemic world, to make a pilgrimage, as it's called, to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And you can look at the chart in the chapter that details the rest of the Arab world in terms of practicing Muslims. Now we're going to focus specifically on Saudi Arabia. Fred Yant tries to make the case in the chapter that Saudi Arabia is more important than some of the other Middle Eastern countries in terms of U.S. relations, and so it should be highlighted. And Saudi Arabia is an interesting country in the Middle East. It's a huge country. It occupies 90% of the Arabian Peninsula. So if you look at the map, you'll see the Arabian Peninsula, and Saudi Arabia is occupying 90% of it, with other countries like Kuwait and Qatar. There are little tiny countries around it. In fact, Saudi Arabia is the 13th largest country in the world. But check this out. As big as it is, 98% of the land is desert in Saudi Arabia. It only gets 10 centimeters of rain a year in Saudi Arabia. So what happened to bring Saudi Arabia to the forefront of U.S.-Saudi Arabian relations? Well, it started in 1933. A company called Aramco, which is an oil company, started to develop the country, and then oil was discovered in the 40s. and that is what has provided the riches for Saudi Arabia, because there's just a ton of oil. It's the largest oil producing state in the world, in terms of the size of the country versus with the oil that's underneath it. Saudi Arabia is ruled by a kingdom. It is a kingdom, and the family that is currently in the lineage of the current king is the Saud family, S-A-U-D family, the House of Saud, as it is referred to. And in Saudi Arabia, they practice a very strict form of Islam. They practice a form called Wahhabism, Wahhabism, and it includes things like virtually no contact with unmarried members of the opposite sex. We're not even talking people who are in a relationship, just virtually no contact. And there are public morality codes within Saudi Arabia and the Islamic interpretation. Public morality codes composed of committees, or Matawain, M-A-T-A-W-A-I-N, keep society moral. Only, by the way, men can vote in Saudi Arabia. And the role of media in Saudi Arabia is to educate and inspire national unity, to keep the country together. That's a paramount concern, and in fact the media are controlled by the government. So what is the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia? Well, it comes down to oil. The U.S. imports a lot of oil. I'm not sure if it reports today more oil from Saudi Arabia than anywhere else, but Saudi Arabia is a big supplier of oil, along with Canada, and the U.S. supplies its own oil as well. But the relationship is built on oil and oil dependence. And in the United States, you have a lot of oil dependence because we have, for a start, so many automobiles that are running, but also factories depend on fuel, and people heat their houses with fuel. So oil is part and parcel of our society. Now let's go on to talk about dominant cultural patterns, bringing back in material that we discussed from a previous chapter to better understand the values that are present in not just Saudi Arabia, but in Middle Eastern countries. And I think Fred Yount does this because he believes that there's such a misunderstanding between Americans and the Middle East, primarily exacerbated, made worse, by the wars that have taken place, and of course the terrorist strike and 9/11 in our country. And there is a history of tension and terrorism between our region of the world and that region of the world that has influenced our perceptions. So to try and demystify what a truer Middle East is all about, we're going to look at dominant culture patterns. The first one being that human being nature orientation, the relationship between human beings and nature. And in Arabian countries, everything except humans are administered by God-made laws. Everything except humans administered by God-made laws. In fact, science is understood through Islam. They don't exist next to each other. They're not juxtaposed. Science exists through Islam. When it comes to that activity orientation, the next dimension, earning a living is not just a good ethic, it's a duty and a virtue. And whatever you earn, by the way, is yours. Nobody has a right to take it, including the government. When it comes to the time orientation dimension, in Arab culture, their calendar is based on a lunar calendar. So it's actually 11 days shorter than a solar calendar based on the sun. And in the time orientation environment in most of Arab culture, you have a polychronic culture. Polychronic means get involved with and interact with as many people's lives as you can in Arab culture. And also, things are done according to sunrise and sunset. It's sunset and sunrise also indicates when you're supposed to be praying. So those cycles are part of the time orientation in Arabia. And when I say Arabia, I mean across all Arab countries. Now, when we look at the human nature orientation, humans are not born into sin like they are in Christianity. They are born free of sin, but it is God, Muhammad is God. Sorry, the God in Islamic religion is Allah. I don't believe I've mentioned that yet. So the God of Allah is who endows humans with intelligence and choice. And when we come to the relational orientation, it's very group-oriented culture. People do things in groups, families, friends, associates, a lot of group behavior. In terms of the role of women in in Middle Eastern culture, Muslim perceive that women are equal but not identical. Now that may be difficult to wrap your head around. How can women be equal but not identical? Women are deprived. Yeah, that word is actually used, deprived in some ways. And so as a result, women necessarily, according to the law of Islam, need to wear the abaya, A-B-A-Y-A, which is that veil and that dress that hides them except for their eyes. And this is going to represent honor, dignity, chastity, and purity. In fact, Saudi women today, they need permission from a male to go to university, to get married, or to travel abroad. So now let's finish with some of the communication barriers that we're trying to break down, but which have resulted between our two regions of the world. And we're asking the question, why have they resulted? Well, political unrest and terrorism. So there is a lot of political unrest in Saudi Arabia. We had the Facebook revolution, which toppled the president of Egypt, for example. And we've had unrest in Syria for a long time. And of course, Palestine, Israel, which we've mentioned. Iraq and Iran. There's been a lot of terrorism, a lot of political unrest that's created a barrier between us in the West and them in the Middle East. Also, there's been a lot of westernization versus traditional culture clashes, where the cultures in Saudi Arabia are more traditional and are more resistant to change, whether it's cell phones, clothing, style of eating, relationships between sexes. That's seen as a Western influence that Saudi Arabia, like China, by the way, doesn't want. So there's a lot of resistance to American media content which depicts these kinds of behaviors. So there you have it. We've just finished talking about the oldest identity in the history of humans identifying with an identity. I hope you're able to consider your own situation in the context of this material. Have a great day.